Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. He's talking to today's industry leaders and entrepreneurs about the people side of their business.
Welcome to the Best Team Wins podcast, where we feature entrepreneurs and business leaders whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, and for the next 25 minutes, I'll be your host as we explore how to build your business through better hiring. Today on the program, David Blake is the CEO of Degreed, based in San Francisco. Degreed is a venture-backed firm founded in 2012 with 150 employees and doing some pretty amazing things. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we are here today to focus on the people side of Degreed. But before we dive in, let's set the stage. Give us 30 seconds on Degreed and what you do.
Yeah, when the company was born out of the question, tell me about your education. And when you ask that of people, they inevitably tell you where they went to university and what degree they have. And it's just this reflection of the fact that we have no universal way to speak to our lifelong learning. And so that was really the ambition and mission of the company, was to make all lifelong learning count and matter and be transparent in our lives and in the market, so we can connect and grow and develop and transact on that learning.
Yeah, I read a piece written about you in Fast Company where you talk about that fact and equate it to, asking an exercise question and someone telling you about the time they ran a marathon 23 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's, akin to if I said, tell me about your health, and you said I ran a marathon in 1999, that really is an absurd answer to that question, but we answer our education in the exact same way. Tell me about your education. And you say, well, I went to, SMU in 1999. I graduated in economics. And it's not because marathons are bad, and it's not because college is bad. It's just a reflection of, it really is an absurdity. We're conditioned to it, but it's an absurdity that when I say, tell me about your education, you tell me what you did 25 years ago.
And if listeners want to learn more or check out the courses, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, Degreed.com. It's free for anyone to use. And while we ourselves aren't a provider of education or content, really our platform is about helping you find and discover the best resources online, offline, to learn anything. So we've integrated with nearly the entirety of the world of training and learning providers, and so that you can have the best resources discoverable to you, and you can structure that and create a pathway for yourself to learn whatever you need from the best content out there.
All right, let's talk about the people side of the business and start going back to 2012 when things got started. Talk about how that first team came together and that moment you knew it was time to go beyond founders and put that first person on the payroll.
For me, it was a fairly, I don't know what the right word is, audacious, scary start. We live in San Francisco. We had been a part of startups previously, just as by their very nature, startups don't always, pay the best, sort of the risk reward. And, we've been able to save a little bit, but not a lot. And it was an expensive city. And I was a father of two. And at the time, my wife didn't work. And so when we started the company, we were spending, we had very little personal runway. And so hiring people was, a big step for us. And, but also knew that, this was something I wouldn't be able to do alone. And so had to balance that and set out to find a co-founder. And, Eric Sharp, my co-founder, was the first person to join. And it would be a few months before I was able to be connected with and recruit him and pull him into the company. And just a phenomenal talent. We've been at it ever since together, and but it was a big step. For the first couple of months, I was paying his salary on my credit cards, and so it was important that it was a good match and a strong fit, because there was a lot of risk involved.
So, what about him did you believe at the time made him the right person to make this investment with?
Yeah, the decision criterion process is a lot different in the early days than it is, later on, where it becomes much more structured, and you're talking to a lot of people, and there's some recognition to the company and the space and in the industry. And so it changes a lot. I mean, in those early days, some of it's who out there is harebrained enough, to go on this crazy ride with you. And, being people who are in a position to go on a crazy adventure like that, it filters a lot of people out. I mean, just for the risk profile, for the financial ability, and, luckily, and then you have the talents and the fit. And Eric and I were really aligned. His own education, he came from really sort of the backwoods of Wyoming and grew up, and education was really the point of leverage that enabled him to sort of elevate his position in life and to be able to unlock opportunities and to meet and reach his ambitions. And so he had a deep passion for education and the power that it could have in others' lives. And so we were deeply aligned with that. And his spouse, Sarah, was also, really interested and deeply committed. And I think in those early days, it's especially important that, sort of the couple and the family are also committed to it, because it takes so much from in those early days, and a lot is demanded, and a lot ultimately is sacrificed by spouses and families. And, and then his life, luckily, was enabled to make that jump, where he was part of a company that had just recently been acquired, and, and it gave him both sort of the financial opportunity as well as the window in his career to be able to take something like this on.
You alluded to the fact that hiring later in the stage of the business, perhaps where you guys are now with 150 people, much different, a little more systematic than perhaps looking for utility players early on. How did you organizationally learn how to go through that journey? I mean, take us through the maturation of the selection process, and when was we like this person, not, we think they could do lots of things, not good enough anymore?
Yeah, I mean, we have two principles as a company when it comes to sort of who we let on the bus. And one is we aspire to hire well, and the second is we aspire to fire well. I think all companies probably aspire to hire well. Not all will openly talk about or sort of explicitly make it a goal to fire well. We believe both are important. The principle that guides who we hire is really sort of the discipline of it has to be an easy yes. And, when the candidate isn't right, it's actually pretty easy. Once there's, we like this person, but that one's actually usually fairly easy to sort of dismiss that candidate and keep looking. Often that principle has been tested most when, we love the candidate, but timing isn't right, or but the price isn't right, or but the role isn't right, or but so it's a principle that extends beyond just the individual themselves, and we use it to encompass sort of a discipline holistically on dimensions of budget and timing and role and phase and all of those things. But so we've lived by that principle. And then as I've had to recruit and then interview and vet and hire and sell and close and onboard, a lot of people over the course of this journey, there was it's a process I developed early in my career that I use for interviewing people, and it's served me really well, and happy to talk a little bit more about that should it prove interesting.
Yeah, let's go there. So this is a system that was you developed through experience and earlier on. Take us through that. What does that look like?
Yeah, so this came really as I became an early manager in my career. There's nothing about the process in the book, but really sort of what I look back to and what catalyzed the thinking that would go into this process I developed. I was reading Tony Hsieh's Delivering Happiness at the time. And he does talk a little bit about how and who they hire and what questions are asked. But, this process isn't immediately a reflection of that. It really just sort of stirred the pot for me. But, one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur and a founder and CEO and growing a team of diverse talents and job functions and roles is that you're often having to recruit people in an area of expertise where you're not a subject matter expert, or in many cases where you have no subject matter sort of domain. And this process is one that I found adapts to that very well, is able to get a lot of information out of people and even puts people in a position where, it puts a little bit of pressure into the interview itself to where you're able to get a reflection of how people are able to, deal with a challenge. And so what the process is, it's really quite simple. So I bring a pad of sticky notes into every interview I do. And I do two things with those sticky notes. And so it's a similar exercise. I do it twice. The first is I give the sticky notes to the candidate and ask them, what are all the skills and attributes and traits that are going to be required for you to be successful in this role? And so then the candidate is then required to one trait or attribute or skill per sticky note. And it usually ends up being sort of 12, 14, maybe 15, 16 sort of things. And one per sticky note, and just ask that they put them down in front of them as they come up with these. And, what that does, so that first step is really a reflection of, does this person know what is required to be successful? And how well is this person sort of acclimated and self-aware of the requirements of the job and the role and what it requires to be successful? And, and I will sometimes fill in a couple of holes if I see something that I believe is important to the job or the role that they missed. And then the next step of it all is that I then ask the candidate to rank order all of those things. And on the table now are only positive attributes and skills, by the very definition of the task, are required and necessary to be successful. So you have only sort of good, positive things in front of you. But then I ask the candidate to rank order those things in the order in which a reflection of themselves, which are they strongest at, to what is ultimately their weakest of those attributes. And this is, by the very nature of the task, a bit of a difficult challenge, because it is forcing people to force rank what is entirely positive things. And so there's no right or wrong answer here. Necessarily, people are ultimately, I believe, under that pressure. It's hard to think about what might be the right answer or how to game it. And really you get a pretty good reflection of people's truth and people's reality, which is just which of these things are they best and strongest at. And good things are at the top of the list and good things fall to the bottom of the list. And, and how the candidate can react to that pressure of that task of having to self-identify things that fall to the bottom of that list. And then the last step of it all is then I come back over it and I ask people about it. Why did this end up at the top? What about this one in the middle? Why are these at the bottom? And, seeing people be able to articulate sort of their strengths and, ultimately it doesn't even mean anything at the bottom of the list is necessarily a weakness. It's just, the weakest. And seeing how confidently they are able to stand behind sort of their attributes and their skills and their abilities, even those things that fell to the bottom. And it actually does end up revealing quite a bit, both how people handled that moment and that articulation, as well as what things are at the top of the list and the bottom, as well as that full spectrum. So you come away with a lot of information in a short amount of time. You see the shape of people's skills, you see how they react in that moment, and you're able to get really pretty good exposure of, who they are, what they're going to bring to the table, where you might have to complement or augment their attributes or skills as you bring them onto the team. And so that's the first. And the second, just quickly, what I do is the same thing, but then it's what are you optimizing for as you think about the next role that you're going to take. And so similarly, we, on each sticky note, it's things like, geography and industry and company size and culture and mission and team and growth opportunities and challenge and comp and title, all of those things that affect our roles and that people value and are important in how we shape our careers. We get all those things out on the table, and then they are asked to force rank which of these things are most important to you, and are you optimizing for, and which of these things ultimately are the least important to you. And so then you come away with a really good sense of what people value and what's important to them. And that helps, one, in seeing a reflection of who they are, but also ultimately where you have a candidate who do want to bring onto the team and hire and close. It helps bring that alignment of what's important to them, so that how you can meet those things that are important to them. And we've often found over the course of Degreed, as we've recruited and hired people, companies often think fairly narrowly, in a job offer, cash, maybe equity. We have two levers to play with, and otherwise every offer is a template, and those are the two, sort of knobs that will turn up or turn down. Well, really, people often care about a lot of really very different things. And if you know what they care about, you can often meet those things ultimately to, both parties' ultimate satisfaction much easier than you can just, paying people a lot. So it's served us really well. It's been a bit of a real secret weapon in my career. It served me, and I think Degreed, exceptionally well.
Yeah, I can see why. That's pretty incredible. This is for all roles in the organization.
Yeah, anymore I don't interview every candidate who joins, but especially early on where I did, I would have to interview, engineers, QA engineers, designers. Just people who's, I'm not a domain expert, and I found it was an especially helpful way to bring a meaningful conversation to the table, even where there is an asymmetry of expertise between me and them. I'm able to tease out of them what's important and still engage with them around those points, not necessarily being an expert, but so I used it for all types of roles.
Is there a common set of core values that have been developed in the business that help guide your decisions in addition to the individual interests, likes, hot buttons, or other ways they've self-ranked things, as you discussed?
Sure, there are absolutely. Really early on, as we sat, I'm a first-time CEO and founder. I've now been in the role for 6 years, so I've earned one or two stripes along the way. But really, as I started the company, it was the first time being CEO, first time being founder, and so it was the first time that it felt to me to give that articulation of the mission and the vision, the culture and the brand and the strategy. And as I sat down to that task really very early on, I think it was likely still probably only Eric and I as that task I sat down to it. And, we did come up with very early on an articulation of all those things. And when we talk about our company's culture, we define it as the principles by which we will make decisions and how we treat each other. And we have 12 company principles. They've really held very true over the 6 years. They've evolved ever so slightly, but have served us very well. So, and they range from some being about who we hire, how we structure the organization, our strategy around financing, to diversity and inclusion, to flexibility and family, to what we aim to achieve, in the organization and sort of the outcome we hope to achieve. So it's a sort of a diverse set of principles.
As you look at the people side of your business, David, is there a single philosophy that sums up your approach to that? If we were to define it as, find and keep the right people in the right seats, how would you describe your approach to that at a macro level?
Yeah, I think, definitely, our mission is our guiding star. And, we want people who are behind that and who self-select in to that, and that's sort of the apex. If they're behind the mission, then we, want people we use our cultural principles to create alignment inside the organization. And, as far as people, I think, it has to be an easy yes. That really has been the guiding principle. There really is no other philosophy. We don't talk about A players. We don't talk about anything else. It's the guiding principle has always been that it has to be an easy yes. I don't believe in hiring for fit. I believe in the power of diversity, and I think those things are contrary to each other. I think hiring for fit is a way of code speak for hiring people that look, think, act like yourselves. So there's no consideration given for sort of that quote unquote fit as we both recruit and interview and hire people. We like bringing in people that, really are different from ourselves. When we talk about our company culture, it's not how we act. It's not the office culture. It's not what it feels like to live a day in the life at Degreed. Our principles are how we make decisions and how we treat each other. Not what vibe you get when you walk through our office.
That's been consistent then over the life cycle of building the employee base then?
It has, yeah.
So translating that then to rewards and recognition, how does that philosophy, how is that philosophy reinforced in the way you pay, reward, and promote the people that are on your team?
Yeah, speak to it sort of on the most on the nose is really, actual compensation. How does it translate into compensation? And then I think there are other ways that, rewards extend beyond just compensation or equity, as I mentioned. But, one of our principles is equality. And to that principle, compensation is one of the things that we speak to in that principle. And there's a whole range of philosophies, and there's a whole science, and sort of industry of practice behind compensation. And there's a lot of ways you can come out on this question. For us, we sort of saw it as a spectrum where at one end of the extreme is that flexible approach of you get who you want, the best people, you pay what you have to. Don't ever let compensation keep you from hiring the best person. And the other end of the spectrum is sort of for a given role, pay everyone the exact same. And there's pros and cons to both. That flexible approach means you're more advantaged and have more flexibility and degrees of latitude in who you hire and what it takes to get them through your door. But, one of the downsides of that approach is, over time, ultimately, people are going to be joining your organization from a diversity of contexts and companies. They're going to be being paid different things as they enter the door. And, some people are better at negotiating than others, which doesn't necessarily always immediately translate into any reflection of how competent they are in, achieving their role inside the organization. And you can draw people into the company and through the door, but often are paying very, have a high variance in what you're paying people for the same role or for the same job or for the same work. And over time, that can lead to inequality in pay, and that is something that we were sensitive to as we seek to be an inclusive and diverse and aspire to have equality as one of the principles that guide our organization. But the other end of the extreme is pay everyone the exact same. Well, that's it's a rigid approach. It's one where, it often is hard if you're looking for the best people. They're in companies where they're well paid or situations where they're, and it can be a challenge. And so, that was a question that we confronted very early on and had to decide how we were going to come out. And we sort of split. We take two approaches inside the organization, and both are a bit of, down the middle. There's a bit of a compromise in this. And so for some roles inside the organization, everyone has the exact same compensation structure. Those are often the roles where there is a variable compensation piece to it. So everyone has the same base and they have the same rates on the variable comp. So that's our sales organization, our sales development organization, a couple of other roles, and they all have the exact same structure. Now, at the end of the year, they're going to make varying amounts because of that variable compensation, but they have the same structure on it. Just because one sales rep was being paid more as we brought them through the door, we don't give them a sweeter deal on the rates on their variable compensation. Everyone has the exact same structure. And then the other approach that we've taken is a matrix where for roles like engineering, for our designers, there's a matrix that corresponds with skill level. And at each skill level, there is a small range that allows us some flexibility, but also, balances that need for consistency. And so there's a small range at each step of the matrix. And that's how we've tackled it.
If you think about the last 6 years in the CEO seat, what is the greatest lesson or learning that you've taken away from building the team that you've built?
That is a really tough one. I mean, I think I'll come back to, Degreed has operated really quite gracefully as we've grown. Our retention has been phenomenal. We've had over the course of 6 years and 150 people, we've now had maybe 6 or 7 people ever leave the organization.
That's amazing.
Our retention is exceptionally high. We're an organization where people have complete autonomy and discretion as to whether they're in the office or not, and when and what hours they work. And, for me, it's actually the principle. I talked about how we aspire to hire well and aspire to fire well. And the principle that guides who we fire. So this is a principle we talk about openly, publicly. This one takes a little bit longer to explain. It's perhaps less punchy, but it's really just, we've got this mission to make all lifelong learning matter. We say to jailbreak the degree, and it's a big, audacious, mission, and it's taken a lot of work, and we believe deeply in it. And we believe 100% of our energies need to be focused on that mission. And if at any point people are doing things that require us to turn our attention inwards and to be expending energy on ourselves, sorting through our own issues or challenges, that is energy that's been stolen from pursuing the mission. And that is the day that we will move to terminate someone from the organization. And what that principle has done is, further reinforce this alignment towards the mission. And just, that really is what we are here to do. And we have very little tolerance for, people problems mean you're stealing from the mission. And we've hired well. We give people a lot of autonomy and trust. We really seek to reinforce people in keep them well leveraged in their personal missions. But then we also have this really high bar of what we expect and demand of our people. And it's kept the organization operationally efficient and, and mission driven, and a great place to work. And I think it's served us well. But so I suppose all of that is to say, if you give your people a clear, a North Star and a pathway to pursue it, and work hard to enable them, keep high expectations of them. I've really seen people rise to meet it again and again. I mean, just it's amazing how well the organization is able to operate even with this extreme and high amount of autonomy that we give every individual inside the organization.
So, final question here to wrap things up, David. If you were to come back a year from now and report to the community here whether or not you were able to successfully tackle the single largest people-related challenge or opportunity that you have in front of you in the business today, what would you be telling us happened in 2018?
I mean, I think people, even good people, the best people, we are we look for patterns and routines and processes. Those make us more efficient. And so that is, generally a positive attribute. One of the things I've found, even of the best people, is when, our strategy is one where we talk about our strategy in chapters. It's not, our mission is sort of this guiding North Star and has been consistent, but our strategy, it's all right. Step 1, we're going to go do this. And then step 2, we're going to do this. And shifting people and an organization through a strategy that evolves every 18 to sort of 24 months. Our organization right now is sort of at this another one of these fairly material inflection points in our strategy. And so I think, a year from now, what does success look like? That's one, it's where we've been able to take our organization and they have been able to efficiently and quickly adapt to the new strategy and not lost any time to it, looking backwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the final word. You've been learning from David Blake, CEO of Degreed. David, thank you for being with us on the program today.
It was fun. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Best Team Wins podcast, where we're featuring entrepreneurs whose exceptional approach to the people side of their business has led to incredible results. My name is Adam Robinson, author of the book, The Best Team Wins, which you can find online at www.thebestteamwins.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Best Team Wins podcast with Adam Robinson. You can find out more information about Adam and his book, The Best Team Wins, Building Your Business Through Predictive Hiring, at thebestteamwins.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.